Before we move on to the Punk talk here, which we do need to address, I just do want to give RJ the Forum 2 rant, and it's WrestleRant Radio, and we've got about 20 minutes left here on the show, and Clark and I are going to be talking about this since RJ did not listen to the podcast.
Thank God.
So I want to get your thoughts, RJ. You're not the biggest Punk fan, obviously, so I want to give you your thoughts on the on CM Punk. Rant away, my friend.
Rant away? I don't know. I saw what he said and stuff like that, like bitching and moaning about like how he was hurt and like Vince like wanted him to come back early to fight and like how he wasn't getting paid more and all this other crap and like he didn't get the match he wanted so he left. Like Triple H and him weren't the best of friends, but obviously I feel like Triple H is kind of hard to work with. I think he's kind of a very egotistical guy, so I wouldn't see that not being true. But I like I said to Graham, like 2003, I think it was 2003, Lesnar had like broken ribs, a broken neck. Guy won the title and wrestled for the next like freaking like 4 or 5 months with the title. Like that shit happens like that. Like if you're contract and you're supposed to be the best, like Lesnar said it in like an interview with E60 on ESPN. Like, yeah, it sucked. Like I was like taking like prescription pills. I had broken ribs, broken neck, but like I'm the top guy. I can't give up my spot. Like this is what happens. That's why he said he eventually left the WWE at first because he couldn't handle the schedule and like working hurt and stuff like that. But at least he like wrestled the end of his contract then. Like I think the whole CM Punk leaving early, like that just kind of like took a dig at the fans. Like, you know what, screw you. Like I don't get what I want. I'm hurt. I'm just gonna leave. Like Daniel Bryan's been hurt. I bet you all these other guys. Cena's been hurt. Cena had that huge freaking pus thing on his freaking elbow for like 3 years.
I remember that. Yeah.
And he wrestled through it. Like I think it's just like. Just a coward way to leave. Like, oh, I'm just going to leave and pack my stuff and leave because I don't like what's going on. And then, like, everyone's like, oh, he got fired on his freaking wedding. Then don't leave in the first place. And if the communication was there that he was eventually going to come back, I doubt they would have fired him. I think he just didn't say anything to anyone. And supposedly it was by accident that they fired him on his wedding. I don't know.
That's what Vince said.
Vince said, but I just think that if you leave, you should expect to get the pink slip. That's like saying if you leave your job at freaking a corporate place and you leave and just don't say anything, then they're just going to fire you, and that's what happens. That's like saying a guy in the NFL just leaves his football team for 3 months and he's surprised he gets fired. It's a business, people. You can't just leave your job and not say anything. I don't know. I've never really been the biggest Punk fan. I think he took the easy way out and kind of like stuck it to the fans saying, like, you know what, I'm not going to wrestle anymore and I'm not going to say anything for fucking pretty much a year he waited to say anything. I just think it's kind of bullshit. I don't know.
So, well, on that note, I thought it was interesting from what he said. He didn't come out right and set up, but it was just kind of inference in that he walked out. We'll just do the timeline here. He walked out in January after the Royal Rumble, and he was suspended for 2 months after, his suspension would have ran up the night after WrestleMania, which is what he said in the podcast. So after the suspension was over, he was eligible to come back, but they weren't in communication with each other. Vince said he's hard to communicate. Punk said the same thing about them. So two sides of the story. Whatever. We'll never really know the truth. So that happened, and then he was going on his honeymoon. Triple H said, let's talk, and he said, no, talk to me after my honeymoon. And then he finds out he got fired on his wedding day. He got the papers in the mail on that day. Vince, like you said before on the podcast, apologized. He said he didn't listen to the podcast, but I guess he heard from other people. And he said it was just a coincidence. We'll never really know. But what I want to talk about just briefly from my perspective is that I think, had they not fired him, there is a chance, because he never said he was leaving. He said he was still under contract after he walked out. It wasn't until June that he was officially let go. So I think there could have been a chance that he could have come back had they had the right communication skills, and he could have been back by now. We could be seeing CM Punk in the WWE. So I thought that was interesting. So all the times that, for earlier on in the year that we were talking about and people were asking, when's he coming back, there was a chance he could have been back. Like, he could have been right. You know what I mean? Like, I guess we'll never really know. I just thought that was interesting. But complete 180 here. We go from, the CM Punk, I don't know, because you don't like CM Punk. I like CM Punk. Clark's a big CM Punk fan, so just getting the whole spectrum here. But Clark, I want to get your thoughts. What were you thinking when you heard this 2-hour podcast with Colt Cabana last week on Thanksgiving Day? What was going through your head when you heard this podcast?
Well, first off, let me say that I am really happy that Punk is healthy and happy with his life now. But yeah, when Punk walked out back in January, you see, the news broke out on a Wednesday, and that was the week that WWE was in my town, Wichita, Kansas, and he was advertised for Wichita, So I went up to Mom, and she was taking me and my brother to the event. I said, Mom, CM Punk left the company. She's like, it's just a storyline. I'm like, no, he really left. And she's like, no way. But, yeah, I kept on waiting and waiting for Punk to come back. But then I was at a summer camp when his contract expired. I'm like, well, I guess we're not going to see him back. Plus, when he said something about, like, his lawyer saying that he absolutely despises professional wrestling, that just, like, just put a nail in the coffin. Like, we're probably not going to see Punk for a while, considering the fact that he hates professional wrestling now. But yeah, I enjoyed hearing his side of the story. Hearing him say that he had a staph infection for months while wrestling with it, and then getting it checked out, and the doctor said that he could be dead. That's just like, whoa! Like, if Punk never left and he was still wrestling right now, he wouldn't be wrestling right now. He'd be dead right now. But yeah, I'm really happy that he's doing whatever he does, going to a Blackhawks game, writing comic books, all that stuff.
So on that note, too, there were a couple of rumors going around a while ago in terms of, all this stuff, why CM Punk left, a lot of speculation. You and I talked about it the first time we were ever on the show many, many months ago. And, on that note, I also am very glad that he's healthy, happy, whatever, so I'm glad he's doing his own thing now. But bottom line, one of the rumors that was going around why he left was because of Batista, and
yeah.
I thought that was interesting because he talked about that on the podcast, why Punk, along with everyone else except for Vince and maybe a few other people, thought it was a good idea to bring him back as a babyface, but Punk and like I said before, Punk and everyone else was against it, whatever. But that was a big rumor for a very long time that people resented Batista because he was the reason why Punk left. And, of course,
yeah.
Punk cleared that up. That was not the case at all, so I thought that was interesting. But, just a lot of weird, interesting comments from Punk about certain things. Like, a lot of it I agreed with. The Ryback stuff I thought was interesting. Like, he completely... there was only 3 people on the podcast.
He just verbally killed Ryback.
Yeah, pretty much.
I know Punk hates the word now, but he dropped a pipe bomb on him. So, yeah.
No, yeah, it was. There were 3 people over the course of the podcast that he verbally buried. It was Triple H, Ryback, and the Doctor, Chris Amon, I think his name was.
Yep.
But so that was interesting. But yeah, I just thought it was really, really interesting and how he talked about it and his departure and stuff like that. But you mentioned it yourself, and you kind of implied there that you thought he would be back. Do you think he will be back one day in some capacity?
Time will tell. I can't. I'm not going to look into the future because if Punk does, in wrestling, all wrestlers say expect the unexpected, never say never, all that stuff. And Punk did not say anything like I'm done with WWE. Well, actually, yeah, he did in the podcast, but it's probably just because he still has a heated relationship with them. But, Ultimate Warrior had that same thing, and Stone Cold Steve Austin did back in 2002. I think Punk just needs to, cool down a little bit and then talk to Vince or whoever. And if Vince is gone, permanently gone, and Triple H taking over, then we probably won't see Punk for a while because Triple H hates him.
There were a lot of things about it that I thought were really interesting, and that, like you just talked about, and him returning, and just everything about the whole fact about Warrior, Savage, Bruno Sammartino, everyone comes back eventually. And I think of CM Punk, he's a lot like Warrior in the way, the mindset and the kind of stubbornness a little bit. And Stone Cold, like you said, Stone Cold is like Punk in that way too, but it took Stone Cold, 8 months to come back? It took Warrior 18 years. So it's really, really different in that sense, but bottom line is that Warrior ultimately came back, and I do think he will be making it back at some point as well. I'm not saying it's going to be anytime. Like I've said this since day one, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. It's not going to be next month, next year, whatever. I just think he'll be back at some point, even if it's for a Hall of Fame induction. It may not be in a wrestling role, but I think he'll be back at some point. But I was thinking before, too, I was thinking about this a couple days ago, in that the big thing with San Martino and Savage especially and Warrior is that these guys were all old. They don't have much time left, and if they didn't bury the hatchet, they would die without burying the hatchet. That's exactly what happened with Savage, and I'm thinking to myself, that's not going to happen with CM Punk, and he has a lot more time than these guys because he left when he was 35, 36 years old. But the problem isn't with Punk, it's more so with WWE, with Vince being 69 years old. I'm not saying he's going to die in the next 5 years, but he doesn't have a lot of time left. You know what I mean? I think if if there's any chance of him coming back, he's not going to be making amends with Triple H first. It'd be with Vince, because he obviously is on better terms with Vince, and he said that in the podcast last night that he'd be open to talking with CM Punk. And Vince was talking about how they had Jim Ross, and Jim Ross was kind of the mediator between the two. And they don't have a Jim Ross-like figure today in WWE, so maybe that's all they really need. But if Vince was gone and Triple H was in charge, it's a lot less likely that we'd see CM Punk back in WWE. Kurt Angle's a prime example, I think. Again, all dirt sheet stuff. Take it for what it's worth. And that Triple H didn't like Kurt Angle, hence why he didn't sign a contract with him a couple of months ago. Hence why he's not coming back to the WWE next year. And I guess he's sticking with TNA. It's never really been confirmed yet. We're all just all speculation.